most of the things you see out there are affecting matter with your mind and visualization for manifesting. And I don't think that's very, very accurate. I think that's more like the mind is the steering wheel of a car. It just sets direction of intention. The car goes nowhere without gas. The best gas we found for this and for life is unconditional love. So having that flowing plus intention is when you get these, quote, miracle results.
I'd like to welcome to the Journeying Soul, Dr. Joseph Gallenberger. How are you doing today, Joe?
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Am I sounding okay to you? Sometimes when I go on Zoom, I sound like a mouse until I go on twice.
No, you're good. You're good. Let us begin. So you are a clinical psychologist by trade, but have been in the Monroe Institute since the early 90s. Did you know Bob Monroe?
Yes, I did not know him well like a best friend, but working up there for about 10 weeks a year for the last 30 years. In the early part of that, while he was living, we'd have occasion to sit on a hill together and look at the birds flying in the thermals and him talking about new ideas for new things in his meditations, how life was going for him, those kind of things, and also a little bit what was going on in my life. So I also got to see him talk in front of many, many groups, and he was a great presenter, if you will, and would hold the audience in rapt attention for hours as he talked.
You knew him towards the end of his life, I guess.
Yes.
That overlap. What else was he looking to do?
It's actually consistent with what he wanted to do. Let me give you the evolution. Initially, he wanted to run 5,000 people through using brainwave patterning exercises on headphones, using sound, to see if he could duplicate what he called his out-of-body experience, because he thought that 5,000 people would be a good research base for that. And quickly it broadened into, as he began programs in this, people discovering all kinds of things, contacts with guides, visiting loved ones who had passed, many different things that he may not have been expecting in the beginning. So by the end of his life, his feeling was more that his work could help the world reduce its level of fear, because it would lose its fear of death, for one. And that was behind a lot of our problems, is survival orienting. We do a lot of things to try to survival of the fittest, if you will. So by gentling that out and seeing that we survive physical death in some form, he felt that many of the world's problems would be able to shift and be eased. So his goal, which he passed on to the people who now are in charge, was that he thought if they've concretized this into, if they can get 1% of the world to experience some alteration in conscious awareness, either through Monroe Institute technique or other meditation techniques, that they think that will be very transformative. So the Monroe Institute's goal at this point is to reach 80 million people, I think by maybe 2030. I'm not sure on the date, but so they've expanded into having a free app you can get on the phone with meditations. There's a paid subscription to that goes even deeper. When Bob was alive, he was doing mainly week-long workshops, intensive residential, that took quite a bit of commitment of time and money. Now they've broadened into 2-hour workshops, 3-hour workshops, half day, full day, 3-day, 1 long week, but virtual. That started with COVID, and also the residential. So they're trying to create a larger funnel where people can come in at whatever level they might be interested in. If that was just to learn technologies to relax and sleep better, to work with energy healing, contact and guidance better, higher creativity, that there'd be something at the Institute for them that would gently push them more to understand that they're more than their physical body, their personality, their gender role, their job at work, and that we might be spiritual beings having a physical experience, if you will. So that's what's gone on at the Institute since he died.
How did your family feel? You got a degree in psychology. You're a clinical psychologist. You're a doctor in the family. How did they feel when you went to Monroe? Did they have an opinion about it, one way or the other?
I would say it would be variable, though my family ethos was to respect each person's journey. So I was thinking of becoming a monk. When I was 12, 13 years old, I applied and went to a monastery. And my parents' reaction to that was, whatever you decide, if it's genuine and you're in integrity, we applaud your path in life, whatever that might be. Most of my family was very business oriented, presidents and vice presidents of very large companies and things. And so being a doctor was a divergence from that by itself. Then in terms of being caregiving, which I saw, the doctor role as a legitimate one, I presented this, which was true. The Monroe was giving me a technology through these meditations on headphones where I could handle people's anxiety, depression issues, and what have you much, much more rapidly and effectively than some of the talk therapy, or in combination with that, things went better. So they were fine with that. As you get into the out-of-body parts and contacting people who've passed to the other side, then my family would diverge a bit there. My mother and a few brothers were highly interested, and my father and some other siblings would have been a little more conservative on that route. But they still didn't, they were interested in listening, but they wouldn't have any inclination to try that themselves, the folks that weren't aboard, if you will.
But since you had the desire to become a monk, it was sort of in your wheelhouse, I guess. But also, more importantly, you probably knew how to meditate before you got to, you started to work at the Monroe Institute, I would think.
I was more in the monk area was Catholic, and they teach various forms of prayer. Supplicative prayer, which would be, Lord, would you buy me a Mercedes-Benz, to intercessory prayer, help someone else, to praising, to contemplation. And I was aware of those kinds of things. The monastery was in basically mostly silence, except for classes at that time. So there was a lot of that background, but I didn't have any formal like TM training or making your mind blank kind of meditation type of training. And in fact, Monroe doesn't really strive to do that. They have about a 10-minute beginning to most meditations that is designed to quiet ego and open the heart. And after that, when something comes up, they engage with it as either something to look at or a message, versus thinking that would be a distraction like you might in some other meditative systems. But yeah, I had some.
How was it for you when you first?
Some familiarity with the idea of looking inside and finding that of benefit. So self-reflective, I guess you'd say.
How was it for you when you first started meditating, let's say with the Monroe techniques, as opposed to what you had done? Did somebody teach you this, or is it just purely, here's the headphones?
Frankly, I got a bootlegged copy of an old cassette
All
from one of
right, a
his,
rebel.
yeah, one of his M5000 program, which has gone into be as the Monroe Institute's gateway program now. And the person said, "Shh, don't tell anybody," and but listen to this, and it blew me away. It empowered meditation so beautifully that within minutes you are deeply, deeply relaxed, maybe more so than ever in your life, and then beginning to connect with higher energies, creativity, sixth sense things beyond your five physical senses. So that was an introduction, but I pretty rapidly went up to Monroe Institute, and in the Gateway found it one of the most profound weeks of my life in terms of opening my eyes to what is possible in terms of our connection to spirit while we're still in body, if you will.
What was it like the first time you walked into the Institute? Did you feel like you'd found your people?
Yeah, I was buzzing before I even got there. I was excited. A friend of mine came that I hadn't seen in years unexpectedly the night I was going to drive up to Virginia from North Carolina. And we stayed up till midnight talking. So I left in the middle of the night. And about 3 a.m., I stopped. I was tired someplace in rural Virginia, and it was very humid. I went in, got a hotel room, laid down, couldn't sleep. I was too excited, got back up and said, "Gee, I wish I hadn't had to pay for this room. I only was in it 20 minutes. But I went to the desk to pay the guy, and I paid him, and it was about $20. That's how long ago it was. And when I walked out of the door, there was a freshly folded $20 bill completely dry on the step. And miracle things like that happened all the way up to the Institute. When I got there, it felt like home. It was so good to talk to people about things that I thought were quite weird and maybe other people hadn't experienced. And the Institute is great because it has no dogma, so it attracts atheists and Buddhists and fundamentalist ministers, Republicans and Democrats, and everybody respects each other while they're there and gets along well. So it did feel like community, and the meditations were very deep. I had some out-of-body experiences, which I had had spontaneous in my life, but this was more controlled. But also, feelings of connection with spirit that years of prayer had not really taken me as deeply as within that week. So I was real impressed. I wanted to go back, which I did pretty quickly. After 2 or 3 times, I said, "This is getting expensive," and decided I'd like to be a trainer. This is 33 years ago, maybe, and I got accepted. They have a very strong apprentice program to be a trainer. You got to go through quite a few steps. And I did that. And so I've been training there, I think, 30 plus years as a result. And one of the big things, I'd been to other workshops where there was kind of a guru feeling and you had to wear an orange robe or believe something to be accepted. And this had none of that. And that appealed to me, as well as the scientific basis. They were using 128 lead EEGs, measuring brainwave patterns, being able to put things on paper to prove that this wasn't just all wishful thinking. So I was really impressed at the research base of the Institute as well.
You were there, I think you were there, or had gotten there right before there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, I guess,
Yes.
the front page story that
Yeah.
sort of outed, I guess, I don't know if it outed the Army or if it or the government, or if it outed the Monroe Institute, but the story broke that the government had partnered with the Monroe Institute. What was the vibe in the Institute when that story came out?
Okay, well, some of these things now are being combined that I don't think go together. But there was a New York Times article, and it resulted in a lot of people wanting to come and then wanting steak and filet mignon, okay? And when there would be an article at that same time, there was one in Mother Earth News, and all those people came and wanted vegetarian fare. And, very different audiences from different articles, as well as Bob's original books. And so the kitchen was having fits trying to figure out which kind of meals to serve as the audiences would change. The military things were kept quite, they weren't trying to be kept secret, but they were, as everybody's who goes there, their privacy was respected. So if you have an army general, or you had a rock star, or you had a Hollywood, big name Hollywood person there, that would not be disclosed, right? That
Yeah,
would be,
you still had to you almost had like the, your background, like a psychologist sense of privacy that
yeah,
people
you
are
had a
coming
right
here
to
to do a certain kind of
privacy
work.
because we knew, with the right to privacy, somebody would get fired from their job, even if their employer found out they were engaged in something, quotes, weird. So that's going on. Now, there was an article that came out about the Gateway program, this premier program, where the CIA and other government organizations were researching remote viewing, the ability to sense things without regard to time or distance, and whether the Gateway program could help them increase accuracy, reduce burnout, increase the quickness in which somebody could get into the meditative state to do this kind of psychic work. And that article then recently has hit the news with a missing page, which was actually just a page that was forgotten to be Xeroxed, copied when they did it. But it caught the attention of a lot of influencers currently on the web. And so there's been quite a surge in the last year about that article from the CIA, because frankly, a lot of people didn't even know the Institute existed. So it brought into mind that a little more. And that group are, everybody that comes is curious. The Wall Street Journal, people were curious in one way or another. Some of them like this information to be able to perhaps to handle ego better when they would make trading in the markets, and maybe even increase their intuition, those kind of things. The Mother Earth News article might have accented something very different, such as out of body. And so you get people with a variety of interests coming there.
So it seemed to me, in just looking at the timeline, that article coming out led to or influenced the government wrapping up some work with on I guess it was with the Monroe Institute, and or pulling funding. What followed? What did and I don't know if you can say, did the work really keep going on under another name, or was it something that the Institute had to adjust to? Am I right about that?
I am not privy to the deepest layers of finances with all of this.
Okay.
From the layer of which I was operating, getting paid to be a consultant trainer. We're not employees. They hire people to come in from 4 to 10 weeks a year, and looking at how things are renovated, buildings being built, or whatever it would be. It seemed like there was not a huge change depending on what the military was doing. I think that was a fairly aside interest in the main thrust of the Institute.
It was siloed off.
We're coming,
sounds like.
To explore things. But Joe McMonagle is, I feel, one of the world's best remote viewers. He was a remote viewer 001 in the government program that went for 20 years. He ended up marrying one of Bob's children. He lives up there. He still talks in many of the programs there about remote viewing, and has his own remote viewing program there that has been there for at least the last 20 years. So that continuity is continued. And you're right in terms of the formal remote viewing program under the name Stargate and Grill Flame and several other government names, as best we know, officially ended. There's still quite a bit of government interacting with remote viewers of that level quality to find lost children, to solve crime, to find temple sites in Japan, to do many things. And I would not be surprised if sometimes they are queried about significant military concerns. But again, that would not be something I would be privy to, nor the general public. That would usually happen at higher levels of security clearance than I would have, that's for sure.
Switching to the personal. So your brother Peter committed suicide about 2 years before you started at Monroe. Was that, it doesn't sound from what you said previously that was a motivating factor for joining Monroe, but it sounds a little bit like it was kismet that it put you there.
Yeah, so just to correct timeline a little bit, I had already gone to Monroe for a few years before becoming a trainer. So I had taken their gateway program and their second program called Guidelines, and a third program, which is a brand new program called Lifeline, which involved helping people on the other side and transitioning from death. I was in the first program as a participant, and my brother committed suicide. Committing suicide is not what we say anymore. He died by suicide about a week after that first program. It was helpful to me to have the Monroe group hone in on him on the other side, and helpful to me in terms of my communication with him. So I wrote a book, Brothers Forever, and a follow-up 20 years later called Heaven is for Healing, about what's going on the other side for him and what went on in my life here for the last 20 years. And the Institute was helpful in seeing, at a knowing basis, not just belief, that every drop of experience is treasured and all death leads to light. And there's not any judgment as in traditional religious kinds of models, but when you die, there is more triage about what you need to grow and learn and heal, depending on your life circumstances. So the Institute got to be very woven into my life after my brother's death, but I think it was already the best thing going on in my life, if you will, in terms of excitement and new information and growth. And in fact, I even had shared some of that with my brother Pete, and advocated that he go for a program, but he didn't feel that he could alleviate his depression enough to be able to go and use it constructively. But my thrill about Monroe was going on before he died.
So I want to ask you, what was it like when you first when you first made a connection with Peter after he had left his physical body, when you were able to reconnect?
Initially after his death, because suicide often does this, I and much of the family was very fried. We were just, too jazzed up to connect much. I used the Monroe Institute meditation exercises and was able to calm down and feel kind of an angelic consolation, but not his presence particularly. As a few weeks went by and I had more of a sense of his presence, the first thing that came, and I'm not a very visual person, I'm more of a knower in meditation, was a visual sign of a street sign that had a gavel, like a judge's gavel with a line through it, with the thought, no judgment, and how relieved he was that he wasn't judged and gone to hell like he would have perhaps expected through religious training. He was hoping for a drop of God's kindness, if you will, and forgiveness. And so he was very thrilled there to find such a compassion there. Then he would often show up for me in ways that had humor or something that he enjoyed, like he was a fancy dresser, and I'm not known for that. And I was going to be on television for the first time about a year after he died. And I was in my closet picking out the right tie and jacket, and I felt his presence come in really strongly to pick out this tie. I was on the floor one time, on sunlit lit floor, on a Persian rug, and I was teaching my about 6-year-old daughter how to play poker with using pennies, and she won like the first 10 hands in a row, and I got very serious and said to her, "Honey, this isn't how it's supposed to go." And then I felt my brother Pete there very strongly laughing, and so he would appear in those kind of ways. And in meditation, he really didn't want to put on the cloak of this lifetime personality, this body, and so I had better luck when I would view him in some essence quality, like his sense of humor and compassion, and seeing him as a being with no body, more as spirit, pure spirit. And then he was willing to engage and interact, and we'd have more communication. Most of it was just love streaming back and forth. There was a channeler, I think is best in the world, who also was talking to Pete for me at that time, if you will, and she would describe for me some of the appreciation he had for all that I had done for him to try to keep him going in this life, and a wistfulness over there, knowing what he knew now, that he probably could have made different decisions, both in life and to die at that time. So there was that type of communication. And then as time went on a little bit more, I got some more of that type of communication where the channeler was having, where it'd be more like a conversation. I might be walking in the woods and feel his presence, and we'd have a little bit of a "how's it going, brother" kind of conversation both ways.
When you were, in addition to being able to reestablish that relationship, did you do things like the spoon bending I know they have a course for it. I think it's MC squared at Monroe.
Yeah.
Did you also do that?
Initially in
You
my life,
designed MCs. I'm sorry, you designed
Yeah,
MC squared.
yeah, mostly in my life it was telepathic type of communication, particularly with my mom, out of body kinds of things. The psychokinesis came when I was up at Monroe, and I had a sense somebody had a headache, and if I touched them, their headache could go away. I asked permission. They said, sure. I touched them. The headache went away. That intrigued me, but it's fuzzy. You don't know if it would have gone away anyway, or God did it, or I did it, or they did it. And if it didn't go away, maybe it's not supposed to. Human beings are kind of messy in a research model. But very quickly, was helping Bob Monroe to design a program called Lifespan 2000 at that point. And we had a gaming night to practice some of the mental tools we were learning. And within there, I started a dice game, just as something simple we could do. And I found I could roll what I wanted on the dice, 7 sevens in a row, for example. And that intrigued me. So I went to Princeton University. It's Princeton Engineering Anomalies, which PEAR. I always want to get the middle mixed up. PEAR lab. And I could see that I could do psychokinesis at a very strong rate. And so I knew it was real and I could do it. That got me excited, and I moved to going to Vegas to learn, because the dice and the slot machines there are very well regulated. There can't be any cheating.
What was it like when you first, let's say, bent the spoon, or did it feel like, oh, of course, or did you have a little thrill? What did you feel?
Well, again, the dice were the first thing that I was really surprised about. And within that, I could see through physical matter. I could hear angelic choirs. I was rolling dice in patterns, like the last workshop we did, 48 numbers in a row with no 7. 7 should come up once in every 6 rolls by statistics. So that was the first dramatic stuff, and I'd leave flying very high. I'd go to a slot machine and say I'd like a royal flush and hearts, which is 160,000 chance, and I did it in the first poll, that kind of stuff. So when spoon bending came along, I wasn't having any luck, and I thought it was probably crap, pardon my French. Could be sleight of hand magician, could be fake.
Yeah, there's
But
a lot of
somebody
ways
I
to fake it.
knew
Yeah.
and trusted very much in their integrity said, "No, Joe, it's real." And I wasn't having any luck until somebody who was good at it put their hand behind my back, kind of back of my heart chakra, while I was holding the metal. And it was a real heavy night of stainless steelware. And it just became like rubber and melted. And so I went, whoa, that's pretty cool. And once I could see it could be done, then I was able to do it more. And I did develop the MC squared program in Monroe, where we do dice rolling and growing seeds. We've had 1.5-inch root growth in 10 minutes in our hands with seeds, the metal bending, even fireplace pokers, the big heavy metal. Got pictures of that. Have a picture of somebody bending a wooden pencil into a pretzel shape. Weird stuff. And studying it, there's physicists that look at this. The metal looks different under electron microscope than if you bent it by force with a machine or something. So it can be faked, but if it's metal that you bought yourself and it's real heavy and you're holding it and you feel it change in your hand, then it becomes a knowing for you that it's not fake. So it's a great training device, much like the dice throwing is, that this stuff is real and within human capacity. And for me, the energy is the same as used in energy healing, like to heal the physical body, as well as in manifesting what we'd like in life. So that's what I've been studying the last 20 plus years. The exercise you referenced called Liquid Luck is my trying to take 30 years of this kind of stuff and reduce it to 30 minutes to give people a taste. And so when they buy that, sometimes they have win lotto tickets and things like that, and get their own quote proof something's going on. So it's been a focus of mine that I liked because the psychokinesis with dice, with slot machines, to some extent metal bending and that kind of thing, can be studied in a laboratory, and you can get statistics there that at this point, if you summarize all the statistics, it's what we call a 7 sigma event, about 1 trillion to 1 by chance, that this would only occur by chance. And so it's more likely that something really is valid here, that these are human capabilities. But Lena, the thing to me is it's very natural, but that doesn't mean easy. Sleep is natural. And if I got tired tonight, I go, oh, I'm getting tired. I think I go to sleep. I yawn a couple times, then I lay down and I forget the intention to go to sleep. I might think of what I'm going to do the next day or something, and we fall asleep. But if I said to somebody, okay, you fall asleep pretty well most of the time, yeah. Okay, I'm going to put you on TV. I'll give you $1 million if you fall asleep in the next half hour. Nobody could do it with an audience watching, or most people couldn't, because now you're self-conscious, you're trying too hard, and the same thing happens with metal bending. If it's not happening, usually the person is trying too hard. And so when we teach metal bending, it's really teaching to get out of fear, to build high energy, to focus it through your heart, to have a clarity of intention, versus this is how you make a or dice land in a certain pattern, or this is the way you make seeds grow in your hand. Ego doesn't know how to do it, and doesn't know how to bend metal. But if you can get ego out of the way, then things happen.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to ask about the spoon bending, because I know that the Monroe Institute, I think, still does a course once a month in it. I don't know if it's virtual but I saw it on the website.
Yeah, they do. They have a couple hour long, around once a month virtual. This is how you bend metal. The MC squared program has been going 20 years. We go in a lot more depth about what you need to do to be able to manifest and use this energy for healing as well as metal bending. Yeah, so it is being taught. The spoon bending by itself in just a couple hours, as gives a taste, and then MC squared you go into great depth. And then I have a home study version called Sync Creation that engages in the metal bending and the seed growing and all that with coaching with me. So there's an option to get it various different ways, depending on how deep you want to go.
But the spoon bending and the luck at the casino and growing seeds, it's almost incidental to where you're trying to get people to go, though, isn't it? It's more the experience of, and you can fill in the blank. I would say, trying to open your heart, open your field. You tell me.
Yeah, bottom line, I think these are all different excuses to love each other in different ways, okay? And love yourself. Within that, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more. Most of the things you see out there are affecting matter with your mind and visualization for manifesting and even in the psychokinesis, like the metal bending. I don't think that's very, very accurate. I think that's more like the mind is the steering wheel of a car. It just sets direction of intention. The car goes nowhere without gas. The best gas we found for this and for life is unconditional love. So having that flowing plus intention is when you get these quote miracle results. And that's where I'm trying to go, is to use these as feedback devices. Because in life, if somebody thought negative, they could think negatively for 6 weeks before they got a cold or some reflection of that negativity. If they wanted a soulmate, they could pray for the soulmate and visualize for a year. And it may take even longer than that for that to come in, for everything to arrange in perfectness for the universe to have that happen. So you could get discouraged. And when we're at the dice table, within seconds, we get rewarded for being in unconditional love, connected to spirit, grounded to the earth, here now in the present moment, rather than worried about past or future. And if we go into greed, fear, and ego, we get punished by withdrawal of money within seconds. It's a very quick training to a more enlightened way of living.
I thought you were going to tell me you get punished by the casino staff, who's like, "What are you people doing at our dice table?"
No, they watch us and they filmed us and whatever, but they're not too worried about us because we're not trying to make a killing. We're betting small amounts. And so say you're going to bend metal today, and the person first tries by, "Gee, I'm afraid I won't be able to do it." So fear is in the way, it's not going to happen. Then underneath that is, "I'm afraid I will be able to do it. And if I do it, it changes my whole concept of reality and all my other beliefs and my sense of power and responsibility in my own life and how the universe works." So there's a little bit of fear there too. So there's a fear of not doing it or doing it. And all of that, if we gentle that out, the first thing people will usually try to do is great effort. Just like trying to lift the foundation of a house, and it doesn't work. And so then they have to figure a way to project power without effort. And people in sports know how to do that, flow states. People that are trained, there's a 10,000-hour rule. I don't know if it's really a rule, but like the Beatles played in clubs around Europe before they ever, quote, became famous. By the time they became famous, they were at ease with their instrument. So we're trying to teach the instrument of the body, if you will, and the mind and the spirit. So you know the notes well enough that you can make music that you couldn't make before, if you will. In this case, it's metal bending. In another case, it might be healing a scratch that, your cat scratch on your arm within 5 minutes. Whatever it might be, it's an application of power that we're not taught in grade school or high school or college, but is a natural part of our abilities, in my opinion. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I did want to, I almost feel this is evil when you read parts of people's books back to them sometimes, but I'm going to do that.
Okay.
So you had said inner vagus. Now, this is one of your books, in addition to Liquid Luck, that is kind of similar. Inner vagus shows you how to apply the energy of the heart to create health and good fortune. and how to tame the dragons you may encounter along the way. I want to talk about the dragons.
Sure.
So
I'm using the word dragon for fear. To me, love has no opposite. We've been talking about love being the energy. So hate is not the opposite. But fear can cloud love, very, very cloudy, if you will. And fear used broadly, that name could be cynicism, boredom, confusion, anger. Like if somebody cuts you off in traffic, the first reaction you're aware of is anger, maybe. But right before that was fear that you're going to be hurt or your car was going to be dented. So we're using fear very broadly, okay? That's the main challenge, is to kind of reduce the fear. And it doesn't work like some systems try to kill ego. You can't kill ego, but you can soften it. And with that, it tends to soften the fears. One of the big ways, like in Liquid Luck, that meditation we mentioned, we move into things like happiness, gratitude, feelings of abundance. That tends to the heart, gets out of ego. And then we think of things where we feel compassion and begin to feel fortunate. And then with all of that, you might have better luck with the lottery ticket. So it's a lot of working with reducing fear. Does that help?
Yes,
I kind of lost your question.
It does. I mean, no, it's a I think this is the most difficult part of the whole process of, and also just of being, when we're talking about being incarnate. And I know that there are certain schools that just try to replace the dragon with gratitude. If you just focus on gratitude, which works to some extent. The other thing I did want to ask about, though, is where self-esteem fits into this equation, or self-belief.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. On the dragons, when I went to Vegas, I would find I'm afraid of doing too well and the casino will ban me, afraid of not doing well and losing my money. Those would be examples of dragons, okay? And meeting fear with courage can work, gratitude can work, but I found it was easier to melt fear with love. If I go into love, which might be thinking of at this point, my mom, say, when I'm at a slot machine, or my brothers, people that are on the other side, I just think how much I love them and feel a flow of energy, like we're in connection in spirit. And then once in a while I'll say, okay, Ma, give me a jackpot or something, and pull the handle or press the button nowadays, and boom, the jackpot. So that's what's going on there. Esteem in general, it's self-concept, I would say, more than self-esteem. So Monroe Institute did an exercise a long time ago to help with golf for people. And people they focused in the imaging and the meditation to drive a long distance. And people started driving incredibly, but then they had 7 putt a hole, because their impression was that they were an 80s golfer, a 90s golfer, a 70s golfer. So that was their self-concept. And that's what you hit. So as I started doing real well in Vegas, for example, the crews would say, here comes Mr. Lucky. And I would say, I'm not lucky, because in my family, I was youngest of 4 boys. My folks had more money. They were easier on me, raising me, than my brothers. So my brothers would say, he's the lucky one. And I'd say, I'm not lucky. So my self-concept is I earned everything by hard work. It was not luck. And so if you have a concept like that, it's hard for fortune to bless you.
Because you have to feel you could receive whether you've worked for it or not.
Yeah, and say you did well, but somebody looked at you and said, "Oh, you're just lucky." That would be, you didn't deserve it. You didn't put in all that effort. So concepts get to be very important. There was a guy, he wanted a job. I'm going to try to make this a quick story. Not having any luck, and I said, "What do you really want?" And he said, "A job about 2 months a year in beautiful weather." And we had him put that out in meditation, and he got an advertising boat at the ocean in the northeast shore of the United States. And pretty girl would drive the boat up and down the beach. Coca-Cola would have one side, local restaurant the other. By the end of the year, he had 3 boats and a Lexus, and the season was 2 months long. But for most people, as soon as you say job, only 2 months a year, they laugh, because for them, 60 hours a week, 50 weeks a year equals job. So that would be concept there. I'll give you another big concept. Many of the people that come to Monroe, if I said, show of hands, how many of you are seekers of wisdom, seekers of spiritual knowledge? All the hands go up. I say, wouldn't you rather be a finder? It's a different energy. Okay. And so we can have things that feel really good inside, like I'm a seeker, I'm on a righteous path, yet that could get in the way of being a finder. Is that making sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, yeah. It does.
So we deal with those kinds of things in the home study course, in the MC Squared program, in the 3-hour spoon bending workshop. They try to transcend that quickly to get you all excited, to show you, yes, you can do it. Same kind of the liquid luck meditation I do. We try to transcend all the issues humans can have and just have such a vivid image of having this magic liquid you can drink and have luck, that you can transcend all that fear and doubt and self-concept issues for temporarily enough to get a taste of what's possible. So that's why we do that.
You also think that I don't want to say these phenomena, but these experiences should be measurable and repeatable. We should be able to have some harder, what people will call harder science. What do you have any idea of, like, what would be the perfect, like a really solid experiment? Like, how would you design it? How big would your group be? Mm-hmm. What would you do?
Yeah, I do like the idea that we can verify, so because you can trick yourself, in ways. One that I like, is coming to mind, that's quite elegant recently, is in science we call it 4-way double blind. Nobody knows who's the experiment group and who's the control group, and within that we can take vials of liquid and put bacteria in the vial. And so in a vial, you might have 100 million bacteria in one vial, all right? Because bacteria are tiny. And you can put an antibiotic in there that we know is proven to kill 95% of the bacteria within 15 minutes, let's say, all right? And then we can have another vial that nobody knows which is which, that energy healers have prayed over to protect the vial, to protect those bacteria inside. And then other people who don't know which is which will measure, and in that vial that's had the protection, maybe 90% of the bacteria survive for 15 minutes instead of 90% are killed. The reason why that's elegant is there's no placebo effect. There's no people involved, in powers of suggestion. And there's, with metal bending, for example, it's very messy. The accusation can be, I pre-soften the metal, I'm using close hand magician work, I'm, super strong. I went into some kind of hypnotic state, like a woman lifting a car off a child, as if that explains anything. But, they'll come up with weird explanations. That bacteria study I just mentioned is very repeatable, and somebody else can do it in their lab, in another lab across the country. And so we look for things like that.
Has it been done, this experiment? Or is this something, has it been done? What you just described?
Yeah, that has been done, and has been done successfully. The ones I've participated in, they'll put like 128 lead EEG on my head. So they're measuring brainwave patterns, and they will say, affect this gray box that has sensors in it for 48 seconds, and then let 48 seconds rest, 48 seconds use the psychokinesis through 100 trials. And those will come out significant statistically, that the box was different when you're trying to affect it. And in the MC Squared program we mentioned, we have over a decade of data showing groups do that and accumulate data to statistical significance level. And that's a little nicer than just accepting somebody's word for it. It gets spooky, though, because if the experimenter believes it's possible, it's more likely that it'll be a positive result. And if the experimenter believes this can't possibly work, it won't most times. So there are experimenter effects, even in the purest quote of science, that we're learning about. In physics, they talk about the observer effect.
Yeah. You also had some overlap with the Department of Perceptual Studies at UVA.
Yes.
I know they do a lot of research. What did you do with them?
So that one with 48 seconds on and off I just mentioned was at UVA, University of Virginia, Division of Perceptual Studies. They're the ones that have also come up to Monroe Institute and gathered data for over a decade on the MC squared program. They have a talented subjects area where they will bring people in who have a reputation of being great healers or what have you. One of their staff members is also a co-director of research at Monroe Institute. And so they have like a copper room. It's all copper with shielding, and they can measure people's electrical fields, and they'll see higher fields on people who are able to project energy well. And they coordinate with other organizations. Rhine Institute, they used to be with North Carolina University. It's separate now. They have a room where it's completely dark to the place where you could count just a few photons in the room when nobody's there. When a human comes in, there's more photons. And when the healer comes in and you say, make the room light, it explodes in light in terms of what they can measure in terms of how many photons. So we're trying to get some objective data rather than just people's feelings. Like, gee, I think I talked to grandma last night, or whatever. That may well have great validity for the individual, and it may be 100% true, but it's hard to replicate in the lab.
Yeah. I know I have a lot of relatives, my dad and my sister, and just tons of aunts and uncles who are deceased. And I had, when my grandparents died, I had experiences, but I had to say to myself, I don't know if this is real because I want it to be. I want my heart's desire. And then I had a couple, one of them was just a couple years ago, where my aunt had died, but I didn't know it. And I had a dream with my father and my sister and my uncle who had died just a month before. And they were with my aunt, who was doing what she would do whenever she would come to our house. She always came with little goodie bags and things like that. And you couldn't do anything until you dealt with her. Like, she couldn't settle until you took the old time magazines and the little casserole she made. Yeah. And in this dream, she was doing that. And my Uncle George looked at me and she said, she's okay, because she was just unpacking. And I woke up in the morning and I said to my mom, I said, I think Aunt Mary's gone, because she was with all our dead relatives. And we got the call a day and a half later. That was one of the few experiences that I could say that wasn't just me because I wanted it. That was something.
Right. In fact, you might have not wanted you would have wanted the exact opposite. But
yes. And there's that part where we can lie to ourselves very easily when our emotions are in a certain place. So I think the research portion is so important. And just backing up, I always think of the Department of Perceptual Studies as doing near-death work that I'd love to talk to them about, but that's what I think of them doing. I didn't realize they did all these
got going initially with reincarnation work. And have, I think, 4,000 at least documented cases of reincarnation. They were formed by a grant to get some of that going. But they do have, they broadened out into this area of studying energy healing and psychokinesis and those kind of things. Maybe not as much telepathy as Institute of Noetic Science does and some other organizations, but they have broadened. But even with your aunt, and many people have that experience. They'll, even not in a dream, they're walking and all of a sudden they know a relative died. Skeptics will say you psychically picked up that their health was beginning to fail or whatever. They will say, oh, you just telepathically picked up something from somebody that knew she was dead. That's not much of a explanation, because that involves psychic functioning as well. But they will try their hardest to not say, this is proof of physical death, or proof of communication through the veil. The interesting thing about Lifeline, the program up in Monroe, it's been going 2 decades now, is we'll get some things that are pretty darn verifiable, where Aunt Nellie will die or whatever, and she'll say, look onto the 4th floorboard in this house in the attic, and there's this box, and inside the box is this letter that explains something that I have to tell somebody, and they'll go and they'll find the letter, things that would be hard to make up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Joe, are you ready for the lightning round? A final question?
Yeah, I didn't know there was going to be one. I'm going to take a sip of water before a lightning round.
Reset. Me too.
Okay.
So first question is, what do you feel, what in your view is a well-lived life? This body, this incarnation.
I like Emerson's definition of leaving the place a little better than when you came.
That's lovely. What do you suspect is the true nature of reality?
I think if you look at protons and neutrons, electrons, and they break down into quarks, and then they break down, best we know, into information packets, and all at the very base of all of that, it looks like it's consciousness. And I think consciousness is love. So I'd say love is the ground of reality. Okay.
How do you feel people can better be engaged with their consciousness or love? We know a lot of people are just going to work.
Exterior-wise, to pay attention to things like the beauty of nature, beauty of music, beauty of how people care for each other, and not listen to broadcast news, if you will. And a lot of hype and stories that are fear generating. And that's the external looking. And inside, I think meditation has a good place as ability, if the mind quiets, that we begin to see we are more than our physical bodies, our ego minds, and what have you. So you have to almost, or you're invited to create a window into more of who you are before you have something like a heart attack that rearranges all your values, or a near-death experience, or who knows what. You can get to the kinds of wisdoms and insights people have under crisis like that through something like a good meditation regime. And I will make a commercial. Meditation is not always la-la, feel good, relax, because as you get more sensitive to yourself, you might realize you might need to go through a divorce, or you might need to change something radical in the marriage that you're scared to bring up, or you might need to have a conversation with your boss or your child that you don't want to have, or that the job is no fun anymore, even though it has golden or silver handcuffs to it in terms of what you get paid. So meditation can bring up awareness of things that are not comfortable. But if you make those changes, most times people have an even fuller life. That was a long answer. I'm sorry.
It has to be the secrets to life, Joe. They have to be pithy.
Yeah, it's got to be 2 words. 42 or 43. What's that? Yeah.
So when you die, is there anything you hope to have answered or to find out?
I'm actually hoping to get confirmation of feelings I've had before life coming in, when I've gotten in touch with that in meditation, of a deep, deep knowing that all is in right order. That at some level, beyond good and evil, black and white, wrong and right, there's a place where, everything is praising everything. So that's where I will aim for, because I've had a taste of that, and I think that is that reality is a little realer. It's paradoxical. There's a book from Middle Egyptian times called The Kabbalion, and the first truth is everything is a dream. Second is everything is real. Third is biggest mistake you can make is deciding one of those statements is truer than the other. So there's a paradoxical nature. So you can't say, that the pain and suffering here are not real, but my brother's feeling, and many people when I talk to them on the other side, is lives here are like a blink of an eye over there. And so they say, don't sweat the small stuff so much. They know that while you're living it, it can seem agonizingly slow if you're in the middle of a dental filling and the Novocaine hasn't taken effect. But from over their perspective, even 20 years of depression or whatever is like a blink of the eye. So I hope to find, I know love is real, and I hope to just find that I can imbibe in it. Once I have dropped the physical, and I think that'll be the case.
Yeah. Okay, and this is a pale little question compared to that one, but it's important. Where can people find you and the good work that you're doing?
I have a website, believe it or not. I'm the only person in the world to have discovered that. And it's www. And then the word sync, SYNC, like synchronize, SYNC, and then the word creation, CREATION. So SYNC, CREATION.com. And there's a lot of free articles about energy healing, psychokinesis, things we're talking about. And then a lot of individual meditations on download, as well as that home study course. If person Googles, if it's easier to remember Liquid Luck, that's probably my most best-selling book in meditation. So if you Google Liquid Luck, you'll find me as well.
Okay. And any last messages for the audience today?
I think I'm going to end with one of my favorite sayings, and I even have it on the wall I can look at, and that is, fear is expensive, love is priceless, choose wisely. So
thank you.
Fear is expensive, and we're coming on an election, we're coming on issues of climate and whatever, that people have very different points of view on it, but it can generate a lot of fear. And if we make decisions out of fear, they're not going to be as high quality as if we make them out of love. So I'll stick with that as my last words.
That's beautiful. That's lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. Click to join us on another journey, and don't forget to subscribe.